Ready? 3, 2, 1.
Hello, hello, and welcome. My name is Jessie Robertson from the website jessierobertson.com, and in today's free painting afternoon, we're going to paint one of my favorite things in the world, which is some patio lights at night. I love using these wonderful cool colors of a night sky. The sun has just set and there's just a few bits of warm light casting onto the bottom of some of these clouds far away. So we're going to use the cool light of the night sky and we're going to contrast it with these really, really warm, glowing patio lights, which I don't know about you, but I've had so many memories looking up in my backyard, just like this. So I'm going to go over our supplies and then we will begin. If we have never painted together before, my name is Jessie Robertson from the website jessierobertson.com, and I do 2 free live painting tutorials every weekend on Saturday and Sunday. I go live once a month on our YouTube community here, and then as well over on my website, and we do Facebook Live as well. So let's go ahead and talk supplies. Today's painting uses just the primary colors plus black and white. So I'll be using phthalo blue, a nice primary red. I'm using a cadmium red today, but any nice bright juicy red will get us some of these fun purples, reds, and oranges in our background. I'm also using cadmium medium yellow, and in some brands of paint this is called warm yellow. We just want to start with a nice deep yellow. That gives us a very wide range of hues, so we can lighten it with some white and we can still use this nice dark tone as well, which looks so lovely in these patio lights here. We'll need some black, of course, for pulling in our shadowed neighborhood. Got a little house peeking out here, and of course one of my favorite things in this painting is the trees. And then we'll need several blobs of white for doing the tints of our colors today. For brushes for today's project, you will need a nice big number 12 flat brush, or any big 1-inch square-headed brush will do. A number 8 filbert. This is about 1/2 inch. It's one of those lovely round-headed brushes, the filbert. We will be using my favorite brush, the number 6 bright brush. That's this, again, about a 1/2 inch square-shaped brush. We will be using some round brushes for doing our little details. The big pointy brush there is a number 6 round, and the little one is a number 1 round. And you can see I've committed a cardinal sin, and I've left my round brush overnight in the water. So the big brush there, its poor tip is looking a little worse for wear. Always take your brushes out of the water at night. And then last but not least, I've got some smaller brushes that I'll be using today. I like having a 1/4 inch flat brush for this project. So any 1/4 inch square shaped brush. This brush can be really handy when it comes time to pulling in our moon and of course the string lights in the back. And it can be very helpful with our trees. And I know some of you are going to go rogue and work on different size canvases. So today I'm working on a bigger one, a 12 by 16. However, the first one I did in this was just on a tiny little, this is just one of those mixed media sketchbooks. I haven't flattened it. I taped up the edges, and this is just a 9 by 12 size in the paper. So if you go really, really small, you'll definitely want to have a little 1/4 inch flat brush. And then last but not least, if you have a number 12 round blender or even a number 6 round blender, a round blender brush, it almost looks like a makeup brush, but this is the Princeton number 12 round blender. And I love these brushes for doing spot hazy things. So I use these brushes for things like clouds, as well as getting a hazy look around lights. If you don't have a number 12 round blender brush, we can just use a regular round brush or even our bright brush. So you can always go rogue and use different brushes, but I know a lot of you who've been painting with me have your round blender. I want to show off how this works today a little bit more. I often get asked what the difference between a mop brush and a round blender brush is, and it's that the round blender brush has really compact little bristles, so we can blend in a small area like a little light and get a concentrated area of a hazy look or in clouds, whereas a mop brush really just softens large fields of color together. So if you have a round blender brush, let's pull that baby out today. If you don't, there's no problem and we can just use another brush. You may want to have a pencil or a white charcoal pencil just for roughing in parts of your composition like your house and your string lights. Whenever we're working with acrylic paints, we want to make sure we've got a nice big jar of water handy for thinning down our paints and of course for cleaning off our brushes in between colors. I'm working on an easel today, but please feel free to just work flat on your painting station at home. And I'm using a canvas board today. So this is canvas stretched across. This is just a cardboard panel. They're a little bit of a smaller footprint than a stretched canvas. They're a little bit cheaper and they're quite flat. So this can just be leaned up on a mantle. If you're painting in paper today, just use a nice heavyweight paper that is at least 110 pounds. I've got a great video for painting on paper, which is one of my favorite things to do. It saves so much space and you can fill a whole book, which is really, really wonderful. Okay, aside from having a blow dryer, that is it for supplies today. And I use my blow dryer to help me dry my colors in between steps so we can keep on keeping on together. You'll want to have some old rags or napkins lying around. These also help clean our brushes and they dry them off in between washings. That is it for supplies, so let's go ahead and start step 1 of our patio lights at night. Now this is a live event, so I can actually see all of your questions and comments just to the side here. I see Sammy G's tuning in from London, Ontario. I see Penny, who has also left her brushes in water. Luckily they were okay. I see Deborah tuning in, welcome. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin step 1, and please feel free to ask me any questions while we're live in the comments section. We're going to begin our painting by pulling in what's in behind before we start painting what's in front. And what's in behind today is our sky. What's in behind today is our sky. So we're going to be painting the blue, then we're going to get into a few of those little sunset colors peeking through, and last but not least, we want to get in some purple clouds before we get into the string lights and of course our trees and our house in the distance. So let's mix a lovely sky blue. This is twilight time, so the sun has just set or is just about to set. It's casting light, so the sky is still a little bit brighter than when it's fully dark at night. So we want to have some of these light blues, and I have 2 paintings here so you could really see. This is just a plain phthalo blue, dark, going into light. And in this canvas here, this is also just phthalo blue, but I've mixed it with a little bit of red to make it more of a periwinkle color, and I think this color looks really lovely with the lights as well. So you can tweak your color. This is just plain phthalo blue and white, and this is phthalo blue with a little tiny hint of red to make it a bit more of a periwinkle color. So when we mix up our background color, we want to make sure we've got lots of it. So I'm going to merge 2 of my blobs of white together. So I'm going to move these over a little. So I've got a nice big blob. We're going to use a lot of this color today. So we've got a nice big blob. We're going to start with our lightest color and then we're going to move up into our darker color. So for our lightest color, let's go just a little scoop of our phthalo blue and we're going to mix this right on into our white here. So I'm going to mix it in. It's going to give us a lovely pale blue, and we've got lots of it. Remember, we're going to mix our other colors from this color. So you want to make sure you've got lots of your colors mixed up. So this is the plain phthalo blue, and maybe I'll go a little bit periwinkle as we head up. Now we're going to have some trees and houses down below, so we don't have to start this color right at the very bottom. But we want to start it fairly close to the bottom and then grab your nice big flat brush and we're going to start painting up with our lighter blue color. So grab a nice big blob. Whenever we're doing a background, we want huge, juicy bits of color, and then we're going to start applying this side to side, and up. Up we go here. side to side, side to side. And keep going up for me. Keep going up for me. Once we've got about halfway up, we're going to start to darken our color a little bit more. I always like to preserve a little bit of the light blue, so I'm going to shimmy some over, and that's just in case we maybe want to use it to correct a little bit of color later on. So I've moved a tiny bit of this light blue up, and we made a huge blob of it. So now we're going to darken this as we go up to get that nice gradient. So I'm going to go grab a little bit more of my phthalo blue. So you're going to slowly darken, and if you want more of that periwinkle color, you'd also go just the tip into your red. So this makes it more of a purpley blue. And I'm going to start on top, and when we're blending colors together, wet on wet, we want to go down, down into the color below, and then up again. This allows for a nice smooth fade, a smooth transition. And we want to get quite dark towards the top of our painting. So when you're ready, we're going to mix a bit more of a dark color. I always like to get all the excess paint off of my brush. Once again, let's darken with some blue. And then maybe even a little bit more red here. And now here our color can start to get quite dark. Here our color can start to get quite dark compared to our first color. So I'm using a nice, it's almost pure dark phthalo, but it's got just a little bit of that white in it. So let's start to get really dark, really dark. And then let's pull this from the top. So you see the difference between this really truly dark color at the top. And never skimp on your color. Grab big brushfuls, and then we're going to come down, covering all the area, and just glide side to side for me. We want a nice thick background, a nice solid gradient. We don't want any bits of canvas shining through. So I'm going to come down. I'm going to come down. And then back up. I'm not going to go all the way to the top. I want to leave it nice and dark up there. Come down. Find that your lower color is starting to dry a little bit, just clean off your brush and go into a bit more of your light color, and then you can pull that up from the bottom. Get ourselves nice and smooth. Okay. Side to side, keep going. You can keep blending a color until it's almost dry. some fun streaky deakies is nice. You know, the sky isn't just solid ever. There's always subtle bits of cloud, and the little streaks can start to look like clouds off in the distance. So I want us to get a nice gradient from the darker color going into the light color. Again, this is twilight, so there's still some light cast from the sun below, which has set, but just set, so it's still casting some light and of course some of those warmer tones as the sun sets. As soon as we have our gradient on, we're going to start to let this dry, and we're going to start planning out the rest of our composition where we want our house to be, and the next step will be adding the clouds in the sky, and then of course some of those warm sunset colors. So as we wait for this to dry, just going to see if we have any questions. I see Angela, hello from Florida, welcome. Okay. I see some questions about the pencil. You know, can I use chalk or regular pencil? We're just going to very roughly sketch on our house at the bottom, and chalk can be really, really nice when it comes to sketching on top of the dark blue background. So any kind of chalk or charcoal that you have that's a lighter color, or even a watercolor pencil. I use the General's white charcoal pencil when I'm drawing over top. These are nice. Make sure to hold it the right way. It's got a white tip, and they're called General's. And these are wonderful because you don't have to erase them. You can draw on with your white chalk and just rub it away with your fingers. So these are really wonderful. You know, if I put a white line onto my canvas here, I can just wipe that away. You know, it's like when rain washes away sidewalk chalk drawings, that just washes clean away with a little bit of water. And I do have all of the brushes that I use listed in our supply shop. So if you were to hit in the description of this video, I use any of the supplies that I use in the brush set. I've been using this brush set for the past 10 years, so you can find the brushes that I use in our supply shop. Okay, we want to allow this to dry before we put clouds on, but I want to show you some fun things that we could do. I know some people out there really love to splatter their stars. So in this itty bitty painting, I just hand painted a few stars when all was said and done. But if you love having a really full night sky full of stars, we could also do a little bit of splattering. And it looks like I did get blue splattered all over my lower part already. But in this upper part here, I definitely splattered on some stars. It's really quite fun to do. So I want to show you how to splatter some stars while we're waiting for this part of our painting to dry. If you want to splatter stars, and I'll show you how it looks before you go ahead and commit to splatter stars, we need to make our paint really quite runny. So I'm going to rinse off my number 6 bright brush. And I like to splatter with these square-headed brushes. And we're going to make a little bit of our paint really quite runny. Really quite runny. So I'm going to take a small scoop of white, just like this. I'm going to move it to the side, and I'm going to start to drip in water until this is as runny as milk. So drip, let's do it again, drip. And I've got this little bit of white, exceptionally runny. And we want it to be runny. If you think about water coming out of a spray bottle, it disperses into tiny little pinpoints of water. If we tried to squeeze yogurt through a spray bottle, it would just fall and it would splatter all over the floor. So when we splatter stars, essentially we're creating a fine mist. So we want our paints to be really runny. So this option here, this little one, was just hand painted stars. But if you want something a little bit more star-studded, this is a great way to do that. So to splatter stars, you need to dip your brush into really runny paint. Then you're just going to pull the bristles back towards you, and then boo, and you're going to let it fly. So pull, 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 and that's how we're going to get our splatter stars. So I'm going to come in here into my white paint. And I'm going to start up here and I'm just going to pull back. Back, 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 back. Back, 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 back. The splatter tends to travel, so you can hold your brush nice and close for me. Okay. So now this is more of a star-studded night sky here. And when you splatter stars, they get to be kind of tiny little pinpricks of light. So this can be a fun way. To get some splatter stars. I see Robin who says, my red and my blue are blending to get a slate gray. That's going to happen if you've got a really orange-based red, because orange and blue are complementary colors. So if you've got a really, really orangish red, it's going to mute the blue a little bit because of the orange in the red. So for pure purples, you want to start with a little bit more of a blue toned red, but those kind of more muted colors are actually a little bit more natural. So those kind of grayish slate purples can be really quite lovely, and we want those colors on purpose sometime. But I wanted to let you know the reason you're getting a little bit more of a gray tone when you mix your blue and your red is of course because of the complementary colors when we use a really orange toned red to create our purple colors. And I got almost like a gray blue here, didn't I? On this one, it's like a soft periwinkle. I think that color is really quite lovely. And I have some different paintings up today just to show you the variety that we can get. And then whenever we're working with warm colors and cool colors, they look really, really juicy and fun together. So feel free to go rogue with your colors. Honey says, I like using a toothbrush. Yeah, they're great for splattering stars as well. And you use a toothbrush just so you would a brush. You just pull those little bristles back towards you with some watery white and let it fly. Okay, I'm going to hit my background with a blow dryer. We want this to be nice and dry, and then we're going to get into pulling in some of the purple clouds in our background. So this little fellow is going to be a bit loud for 1 second. So I want you to go ahead and dry your painting with me if you're painting along with me today. Always amazed me how quickly a blow dryer, when you use it on hot, really dries those colors. So we want to plan out where our cloud is going to be in our painting, and I'm going to move this little fellow over so you can see the two versions that I've got going here. Don't mind, I've splattered all over this painting. It does tend to travel, but hopefully you can still see a bit of the composition here and the cloud. So we've got our little house and our tree line, and we'll roughly sketch it in at the bottom of our painting so that we know generally where we want our clouds to be in the background. So I like to come in and sketch on, my house, and then plan to have my big cloud in the background just above that house so that we can see some of the sunset colors peeking through, and then pulling the string lights down. And I have another cloud in this painting here, and this painting is sort of halfway through the process. So here is a process shot of where we're going with this. So I pulled the blue in, I sketched in the house and where I wanted my string lights to be in this painting, and then I pulled in the cloud and the sunset colors underneath. And as you can see, we're going to build up our string lights in some layers with these warm colors underneath, and slowly building up to those whitest whites, which are going to be in the center. So here's another version on the 12 by 12 of some of these clouds in the distance. And I also want you to think about whether or not you want some of the bigger clouds kind of coming through up top, or whether you want this to be all star-studded. And so this one I didn't splatter stars on. This one I was just going to hand paint them on. But you always have options when it comes to stars, and splattering them can be quite fun. But you don't have to splatter the stars. You can definitely just hand paint them on as well. So here we go. We do want to start planning out where we want the objects to be in our painting here. So if we look at this painting, and if I were to cut it halfway, you can see the house is about 1/4 of the way down. So here's halfway through this painting, and if I cut it in half again, you'll see that house is starting at about 1/4 of the way up from the bottom. So in this one here, even though it's a different size, the same proportions work quite well. So here's half, here's 1/4. So if I want my house to be roughly, and I'm going to use a dark pencil here just so you can see where I'm going with this. You know, the house, even though it's going to be all black, we've got a bit of our A-frame. Then the roof will come straight over. So just roughly sketch this in with me. The back of the roof, the side of the house. So this is kind of like being able to see. This is all going to be black and in silhouette. We're just pulling in our house so we can roughly see where we want the cloud in the background to be. So we're going to have our house, and then of course we'll have some trees coming up in behind. So if we've got our main cloud kind of sitting in this area here, this is going to give us some lovely spaces to fill in our trees and our sunset. So I've just really roughly sketched on a house. So all we see in the house is the light hitting the A-frame of the house. So I want you to draw a triangle, and if it helps for symmetry, you can draw the bottom of your triangle. And if you're even more symmetrically challenged, sometimes I like to put a line down the center. This is all going to be black. But it helps to map it out a bit straight across for me, then angle down and down. So we've got a little bit of a house here, and of course we'll have a lovely, tree line coming up and around. So this is all going to be quite black straight across here with just some mild details. As soon as you've got your house sketched on, we're going to start mixing the purple color for our clouds and some of our sunset colors as well. I want to make sure those who are painting along are good to go. So if you are painting along with the live video with me today, send me a thumb up in the comment section and we'll move on to our cloud color together. So I'll wait until we see some thumbs before we move on to the next step. It is Saturday, so we want to slow things down and just relax into our paintings today. I see just one thumb, so we'll wait for a few more. And in the meantime, I'll show you what we'll be working on tomorrow. So I do 2 free classes every weekend, and tomorrow is going to be a cute one for spring. We're going to be painting this little spring chick. This is just a few colors, green, yellow, orange, and brown. And we're going to make this sweet fuzzy little chick. Again, just breaking her down into some basic shapes. And of course, the quintessential early spring flower, we're going to pull in some daffodils. And I think this is just such a cute spring project to get us in the mood for sunshine and flowers and little babies, little baby birds. They are everywhere, and baby bunnies. Okay, lots of thumbs coming along. So let's keep on keeping on. The next step of our painting is going to be pulling in some clouds. I'm going to hold this up close one more time. So here we go. We've got this big, heavy cumulus cloud off in the distance. Let's look at the shape. So it does sit sort of just above our house. It's quite flat on the bottom. And then I've got it larger on one side. And cumulus clouds have little nubbles and bubbles and some little poofs on them at the top. And I always think the top of a cumulus cloud looks a little bit like popcorn. And we're going to use another cool color for our background. We're going to stick with a nice, almost like a lavender purple color. Now in this painting project, I also took some of that purple and I have some little more high altitude clouds in the background coming up there. I did have a few of my friends say that they found the purple clouds there a little bit distracting and they wished for more of a peaceful open sky. So you always have options. I'm going to show you how to do some of these high altitude clouds, but if you envision it more with a plain open sky, then that's of course your painting, so you should paint it the way that makes you happy. I had less clouds in the sky in this one up here and more flat kind of streaky deakies on the side. So there's no wrong way to do clouds. They are really great fun to paint. So here we go. I'm going to mix my cloud color, that lavender purple, with my number 6 bright brush. My number 6 bright brush. And we want to start with a purple, a blue as the base that's just about the same color as the background. So for this part, this was more of a lighter blue. So good thing we saved some of our lighter blue. I'm going to use a bit of my lighter blue, maybe a little bit of that medium blue. So we're going to start with a blue that's pretty close to the background color, just a little bit darker. And then we're going to tint this with a little bit of our red until we get a nice lavender purple. So start by mixing the value of blue that you want. And value is just a measure of lightness and darkness of a color. So we don't want it too dark. We want to stick with sort of a mid-tone. Got my window open because it's so nice out. It's blowing our little book around. It is spring. It is spring. So we're going to start with our mid-tone for our blue, and then let's purplize this. Purplize is an official term. We'll add red to it slowly until we get a color that we like. So here we go. And if this is more of a muted grayish purple, that's fantastic. It'll be a very natural cloud color. Now, one of my favorite things to do when looking at clouds is to try to guess the undertone of the cloud, because they're always these soft, gray colors. Sometimes even brownish colors, but usually like soft purplish grays. So my red, and you can use, if you want really saturated colors, you could use a vibrant purple straight from the jar. But when it comes to clouds, I often like mixing because we do get a bit more of a natural color. So I've got this soft, we'll call it like a dusty lavender. Almost like a dusty lavender here. Okay. So I'm going to use this color for my lower cloud, and we can always tweak it from there. You would always add more of your red if you wanted it to be even more purple, and just with one more scoop of red, you can see it's got quite a bit more of those pink hues in there. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to snuggle in for this cloud part. I'm going to come right in. We want to have our cloud fairly flat across the bottom. And again, we will likely want to start our cloud. Here's our house, right above the house. So I'm going to come flat across the bottom here with my purple color. I'm going to stop just before the end. And we want to blend this out a bit. So it's always helpful to add a little bit of water to our color. So I'm going to get a little bit of water in here so it's nice and juicy. And then I like to bring my cloud up on one side. I'm just going to use the edge of my square shaped brush. And think of those little puffs, cumulus puffs You can make it come up and down. And I'm using the whole flat side of my brush here. Maybe it's going to get a bit bigger again. I want you to soften the cloud on the bottom by just using kind of a clean, damp brush. So you can use the corner of that brush, just come up and down, up and down. And see, the water has made the color a little bit more see-through. The water has made our cloud just a little bit more see-through. So the first type of blending we did was we did wet on wet blending, and that's where we blend a wet color into another wet color. When we're trying to blend a dry color into, or a wet color into a dry background, we've got to use water when we want to soften those edges. So you can rinse off your brush for me. So you have just a clean, damp brush, and you can use a clean, damp brush. You could test it out on the bottom, you know, where we're going to put some sunset colors anyway. You can use a clean, damp brush to feather some of those edges. Now this is a fairly bold cloud, you know, it's sunset, so it is a fairly dark silhouette of the cloud, but I do like to try to keep it a little bit soft. So I just use some water there to gently feather that in. Now clouds can definitely be challenging, especially when we want to get a shape that we like. So please take your time with this part and just have fun with your cloud. Really work on getting some fun shapes into the tips of those clouds, because the variety in the edge of our cloud is going to make it look a little bit more natural, is what's going to make it look natural. Sometimes I go into a little bit more of my purple color. And another great brush for clouds and edges, of course, are those round brushes. If you're working on a larger canvas like me, the 12 by 16, then you may want to have your number 6 round brush. And because it's got, you know, that little pointy tip, you can really create cloud shapes just by kind of moving it up and down in some fun directions. So I may come in here and thicken my cloud, especially in the middle. And just a little tap, some fun little edges in here. And with clouds, being too close to it becomes very difficult to see the awesome shapes that we have gotten. So please, please, please stand far away from your cloud to assess it. So feel free to back up. Using a clean, damp brush is one of my favorite tips for softening clouds when we're painting over a dry background, especially with a cumulus cloud. This is, you know, we're looking way off in the distance here, so this is a cloud that's far away. It's a nice, ooh, got some white in there. It's a nice dark silhouette, unless you accidentally blobbed white in there like me. And I find with clouds, it's the kind of thing that you could really just tweak all day. So sometimes I have to remind myself to stop messing with it, but sometimes, you know, I get in there and I do a fun mark that's like totally genius and you're happy you did it. So painting always takes a great deal of bravery, and don't let anyone tell you any different. It's people that have never tried painting and they look at it as an outsider don't really know that there's no rules. Even if you're following a tutorial or a lesson, it's ultimately just you and your canvas, and you've got to put the marks down and then make it work. When we're painting, we've got nothing to lose, so bravery always pays off. If you have an intuition that you think you should give something a go, give it a go. And if it works out, then woohoo. If it's something that doesn't work out, then again, you've learned something for the next time you try the same thing. And typically when I'm painting, and I've been painting for well over 20 years now, I do the same thing over and over and over again, especially if it's something I love doing. Like I love painting mountains and clouds and portraits. So when I'm doing something like that, it's like again and again and again and again until I'm happy with it or I've learned what I needed to learn. Okay, so this will be our cloud off in the distance. This will be our cloud off in the distance. Now this canvas is quite a bit longer than this little one here. So there is more room for some potential little clouds in the distance if we want them. It's always helpful to try to imagine the other parts of our painting on here. So we could have a moon off in the distance, and I love having a moon, you know, way up here, and you could have a big crescent moon. You could have a full moon, although the full moon, you know, may compete with the patio lights, which is why I went for a little crescent moon here. But let's imagine that our patio lights are here. So I would probably start my patio lights here and kind of dip them down. So we've got some little ones and some big ones kind of filling in the space. So I'm going to have a string of vibrant, really warm, glowing objects kind of cutting through this upper third section of the canvas, which creates a fun little space in between, in the negative space where we have our moon. And it also creates this little space down below. And I thought it was fun to have a little bit lower altitude clouds there. So we can use our purple color, or you can get in and do a little bit more of a pinkish color if you'd like, especially for the ones that are a little bit lower. So I might take a scoop of my purple, maybe add a bit more red to it just for fun. And I'm going to add some water. I'm going to keep these really soft here. And I'm using my round brush. I've added some water to my paint. I am using the Winsor Newton paints today, which tend to be a bit more heavy body, and heavy body just means they're really quite thick. So when we're doing clouds, to help keep it soft, especially when we're working on a dry background, it can be really helpful to have a little bit of water in there. So I may have a few little low altitude clouds here. Just gonna fuzz a couple of them in. So just like we did before, you know, if my string lights are here, it might look really nice to have just a few little fuzzy clouds coming in. So typically I'll pull in maybe some little wispy shapes. And you can use another brush to soften them in. You've just got to do it quite quickly. If you've got a round blender brush, use this. If you don't, just rinse off your square brush or your round brush and use that. We're going to take a clean, damp brush. And I'm going to show you how to soften these in. So I've pulled in some little shapes. And I've got a clean brush. It's not soaking with water, but it's a little bit damp. So now I can kind of take this brush and soften the edges. And this is where the round blender brush really excels. It excels at softening shapes, especially in a smaller area. So I might go back into a bit of my damp color. Have just a few more of these little guys. Some little whispers, wispy clouds. You know, off in the distance. You could have some on each side if you'd like. Just keep these really soft. We don't want them competing with our patio lights. Now I've gone quite overboard with my clouds. I've added quite a few of them. And now clouds come in all shapes and sizes. So I've got some pretty, flat, wispy clouds. But there's all different types of clouds. So if you've got some larger clouds, or clouds that are a different shape, don't worry if they don't look just like mine. Just have fun with your shapes. Doing this kind of cloud where we're fuzzing in wet paint on a dry background is one of the more difficult types of blending because we're blending in a really small area. So if you don't like your clouds at all, take a step back and assess them first. So always step back, remember maybe why you don't like them. Think about, shapes you would do, if there's something where you're thinking, oh, if this was just a little bit rounder or up a little bit taller, I would have really loved these clouds. So think about them before. Never panic when we're painting because it's always easy to tweak in acrylic painting. So here's what I do and what I've done with this very painting. I did a painting here where I had no clouds in the background and I added clouds and I didn't like them at all. So I just used my background color and I painted it in again. So I just painted from, I liked my big cloud, I just painted from there up. You can also take little bits of it and go in between, or you can just use water to try to soften them in, or just work them until you like them. So whenever we're fixing something in acrylic paint, first stop and think about it, because you may decide you like it, if once the lights are on top, these aren't going to be noticeable. So first think, do I really not like it? Are there things I like about it? And can I work it into the painting? If the answer is hard no, I don't like this part of the painting that I've just attempted, then you can let it dry and then just paint that part out and then, paint the background color back in again. So you can either tweak things or you can paint them out again, and it's quite easy to tweak our acrylics. But this is one way I love to do clouds, which is just with a little bit of, runny color that's, we're using a blue that's almost the same value as the background, so the same lightness and darkness, and we've just used red to darken it a bit, but that's a good thing to do with clouds. If you do love painting clouds, I could do a cloud that's the exact same color as the night sky up here, but if I use red has a darkening effect on blue, so it's a really fun way to get kind of muted clouds, and maybe I'll do one at the top. So this is the blue in the background that I used exactly up here. If I paint this on top of there, you won't see it, it's going to be the same color. But if I add just the tiniest bit of blue to this, it has a darkening effect. So if I wanted to have a really, dark bits of cloud up here, this is the exact same value as the blue that I use. It's just got a bit of red, and boy, does it make it pop and kind of look nice and dark and fun. So you could alternatively get really quite dark and dramatic with your clouds. It is a night sky, so I'm just using this round blender brush here to add some fun round shapes. Kind of round, but they're like little bits, maybe breaking apart. So I've just gone quite dramatic here. Okay. I want you to tweak your clouds until they are the way you like them. And then we want to get down into underneath of our cloud where we do have a little bit of those sunset colors peeking through. It could just be a little bit of pink and orange down here. It really, really does this tiny bit of color pop because so much of this painting is all the cool colors, the purple and blues of our background. So when you're ready, I love pulling a little bit of pink right underneath of my main cloud and then getting into some vibrant, juicy oranges down below here. And we'll mimic some of those same oranges in the warm glow of our patio lights as well. So here we go. Here we go. Let's mix some bright colors. I'm going to rinse off my mixing brush, and I always mix with my bright brush. This is a fantastic mixing brush. because the bristles are so compact. It doesn't soak up all of the paint like, say, your round blender brush or your 12 flat brush, you know. A brush like this for mixing, you know, this would just soak up all that paint, but those little flat square brushes are excellent mixers. So let's mix some pink and some orange, and let's keep them vibrant but light. So let's get some pink, a juicy pink. Mix a pink that you like, but something really vibrant and bright will work quite well here. And then let's mix ourselves a nice bright orange as well. So you've got our pink color. Now you can use colors straight from the tube if you've got some oranges and pinks that you like, but I love showing you how to mix the colors from the primaries. It could just be really handy, and it can save you paint, and we can really customize our colors. So I'm going to take some white and some yellow and a little bit of red, and I'm going to get a nice vibrant juicy orange color. I like a peachy color. I like this color. It's peach. It's a peach. You're a peach. Okay, so peach. Peach. It's Saturday. Saturday, we're painting. I feel a little silly today. Okay. So pinks and peaches, and we're going to pull them right underneath in the sunset area of our painting. Let's begin with some pink. I'm going to rinse my brush. Rinse. Tap off any excess water on your napkin so that it doesn't drip right down the painting. And I'm going to snuggle in again for the sunset part. Now with the pink, I always like to add a little bit of water to my paint so it really helps blend it out while I'm trying to place it. So I'm going to come right underneath this cloud here. Come right underneath. I've got quite a bit of paint on my brush, so if I wanted to blend this out now, I would just smear this pink everywhere, and that's not what we want. So I'm going to pull this bit of pink on, and then I'm going to tap the excess paint off. And then I'm going to take a clean damp brush and let's just soften it in. Soften it in. And you can let some of the blue shine through. Let's just add a bit of sunset colors to the bottom. You get some pinks in there. You can also go right into those peachy colors. And I love having some of those peachy colors flash across the sky, like right on top of the house, just kind of peeking through a little bit. So I'm just pulling in some streaks. And I'm going to pull, we're going to have some trees here, so I'm going to pull this right down so little bits of it shine through. Let's streak in some of those orangey pinks in our lower sunset. You can kind of toggle back and forth pinks and then those really vibrant peachy oranges. Now here's our house, and our trees are definitely going to come, you know, on top of this here. If you want to bring in more pinks and you've got lots of orange on your brush, be sure to rinse and tap before going into the little colors. Whenever we're adding small bits of color we want to change, you want to clean your brush well in between colors. Sometimes I like to pull a little bit of my pink up into the base of this cloud. and then maybe even a little bit into some of the low-lying clouds, but just at the bottom. So the sun is shining from down below. The sun has set and it's just shining up. So if this is a cloud, just a little bit of pink would kind of hit the bottom of some of these clouds. And if you keep your brush nice and wet, so having some of this, rinse your brush, so adding a bit of water to the pink and then tapping it off is going to allow it to stay soft just like we did the first time. So maybe we want to pull some pink into the bottom here of some of these. As that sun is setting, just casting a bit of pink. To some of these. And the nice thing, because we've added water, it's going to make it a bit more see-through. And you could always, if you feel like you've got it too strong, rinse off your blender brush. Make sure to get any of the other color in there off. We can soften our pinks in with our round blender brush. So once you've applied them, rinse. Make sure you get all of the dark purple. But you can come in and just help soften around the edges a little bit. The blender brush is great. If you don't have a blender brush, just use your number 6 round brush for me. It does a great job of softening as well. Some of these fun sunset colors in here. When you feel like you finish your clouds, you can take a deep breath. That was definitely the most challenging part of this project. So once we've got these on, we're going to relax. I don't know about you, but I've got my favorite Saturday afternoon painting beverage with me today. Got some coffee in my Yeti. Yetis are these thermal mugs and they just keep them warm all day long, no matter what the weather. Oh, that's good. Coffee with syrup. Get you through anything. Once we've got these clouds on, we're going to start moving into the next part of the painting, which is going to be bringing in the blacks and really blocking out the fun solid objects in our composition. So the sky is all very ephemeral, gaseous bits of light phenomena up here. So this is all very soft, moving, fluid part of our background. We're going to get into these solid objects like the trees, the house, and the wire for our lights. So we're going to start sketching in where we want our lights to be, where we want our blacks to be, and that will really help ground our composition for us here, and it will start to pop out those colors. Now, none of this has to be super dry. You'll find that black paint across brands is the most pigmented color. It will really cover everything for you really quite well. So depending on the size of substrate that you're using, canvas or paper, will really determine where you place your string lights. And I want to show you something that I did a little bit earlier and what makes a really kind of pleasing composition. So it's always nice to block out where you want that house to be, because we're going to have some trees coming up and a little bit over our cloud, of course. But in this canvas, I have this huge space up here. And we've got our little painting, which is blocked out quite nicely, quite harmoniously. But in this painting, I shoved my fairy lights up a little bit too high. And if we take a look at this painting here, I've got almost an equal amount of space in the upper part of the fairy lights and in the lower. So the distance from here to here and here to here is the same, and it creates this harmony of thirds. We've got 1, 2, 3 spaces that all work well. Whereas here, the distance between here and here, this area is really much bigger. And it kind of looks like the fairy lights are really crowded and pushed up to the top. So working on a longer canvas, when I do it today, I'm going to drop my fairy lights down. I really want them to fill up the thirds in the painting. So if you block it out kind of into thirds here, like this, we're going to have our blacks in the lower third. We really want the fairy lights, even though they're on an angle, to kind of cut through this lower third. So I want to have this third, and I want to have my fairy lights kind of dip down a little bit into this third there. And that thirds always make really, really nice compositions, a bit more peaceful compositions. So we're going to work with our thirds today. So even if you're working on, say, a square shaped canvas, we'd want to do the same. So even if this was a square, we'd want to have our houses a little bit lower, and our fairy lights would have less of a dip, less of an angle, but we can still get a lovely composition when we keep our thirds in mind for this kind of thing. So here we go. Let's start blocking out some of our blacks. So make sure you've got a nice blob of your black poured. And we're going to start with our square shape brushes, specifically our number 6 bright brush. So let's give it a good rinse, and tap. And I like to start before I bring all the trees up and get really crazy and wild. I just block them out, to the bottom half. So we're going to fill in our whole house, and we're going to start to bring up a few trees. That way, if we want to tweak our colors, we can before committing to really pulling the tree shapes right over top of our background. So we're going to start to block in the house, and we're going to start to block in the light for our fairy lights there. So let's begin with the house below. Just go right into your black paint, and it's just as it sounds, we're just going to fill it in. So creating that nighttime atmosphere. I like to think this was a nice warm summer night. We've spent the day outside. And it's one of those warm nights where you can sit out with a t-shirt on. I live in Canada, so our season for sitting outside in t-shirts is short but sweet. We have the most beautiful winters here. The stuff Christmas cards are made of, but when we're done with winter, we are so ready to welcome this warm weather. I always love painting to celebrate the seasons. Okay, so I've blocked in my house, and of course we'll shape it up with some really subtle highlights later on. So this is all in a great deal of shadow, so we're working in a silhouette. I'm just going to roughly maybe block in where some of these trees will be in behind. So I'm just going to take the tip of my brush. I'm going to start tapping at the surface. Maybe I've got one here, maybe a big one here, and of course there'll be another big one coming up. But for now, we're just going to do some little taps at the surface. And then we're really going to fill in down below. I'm definitely going to add some more juicy colors in here. So when it comes to the tips of our trees, down below it's going to be quite solid. But as we get up towards the orange, you can use your square shape brush and just tap it a little bit. Allow some of the orange to show through. A allow a little bit of the orange to show through. And you want to tap in, you know, all different directions, allowing little gaps to show through. Really make it look more like foliage, like trees. So this is a deep black part of our painting. Got our tree line in here. So just tapping in that tree line, just to start blocking it in. So once we've got the bottom filled in with black, it's time to start thinking about where we want to put our string of fairy lights, our string of patio lights. Now, I like to have mine come again. If I were to block this into thirds, I like to have at least my big light hitting right on that third mark. So we kind of want to cut. Think about this whole area of sky as a square of space, and we want to kind of cut right through the middle of it, even though it's a little bit of a dip. So I'm going to come through, whoop, and I'm going to come up to about here on the 16 by 20. We want to get a nice thin line, and when we're covering a long distance, but we still want a thin line, having a nice square shaped brush or flat brush can be really helpful. So I love using a 1/4 inch square. And then we're going to wipe into our color, and this will help preserve the nice flat edge of this brush. So I'm going to just use a bit of water here. I'm going to wipe into my black, making sure there's not so much water that it drips. So if you're worried it has too much water, you can wipe it on your napkin first. I want to pull it down so it's a thin fin. We're going to hold it the long skinny way, and then we're just going to whoop, and we're going to create our string for our fairy lights. Again, we want to have a nice big space here and here that are about equal. So I'm going to come down in a little dip, and you can sketch this on with a pencil first, or if you have a charcoal pencil, because these are white charcoal is great for drawing on. First, you could always give this a little draw with a white chalk pencil, and this is where they really excel, is drawing on top of a dark background. So feel free to draw on with a white chalk pencil. If you don't have white chalk pencils, you can use watercolor pencils for this as well. You don't have to, you can use a regular pencil too. They're just a bit of a pain in the butt to erase sometimes. Whereas if you're using a chalk pencil or a watercolor pencil, you can just wipe it away. So our string light's going to get a little bit bigger towards the tip, but let's go up. Whoop. Let's just get our string across. Just get our string right across. So now we've got this gorgeous, cool tone background. And that is what makes these warm, glowing patio lights really come to life and really pop from the background. We want our blacks to start to dry, but we can sketch on where we want our patio lights to be once you've got your string drawn on. And you can just go right into the paint and start painting circles, or you can draw on with your white chalk pencil. To get a little bit of perspective with these lights, I started with a really quite large one closer to us and got slowly smaller as we got back. And just so you can see the variety of distance we got here, when I put my finger right here, this big one is, several times the size of my finger, And these little ones, my finger totally covers it. So these back ones are smaller than my finger, so small, 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 small. And then it's really with these 4 that I started to get progressively bigger as they come kind of towards us in space. So it's sometimes nice to start with the big one. And you can sketch a circle on if you'd like. Let's get a nice big one. Leave enough room for the little holder. There's a little, so here's the bulb. There's a little square holder and then a little string, a little handle on there. So I love having a nice, really big one. Slightly smaller, and then getting really quite small as we go back in space. So I've just roughly sketched these on. We're gonna build these up in layers. And I love working with this kind of peachy orange color that we had in our background to start, and then getting into yellow and then getting into white. So it really looks like they're glowing from the inside and they're casting this orangey glow around the edge. And let's look at these colors here. So I start by filling the whole thing in with this orange glow. And this is the same orange glow that we've got just peeking through in the bottom of our sunset as well. So let's fill them all in with an orange glow. Then we're going to use a light yellow, and then we'll get some pure whites in the centers to really make them one glowy glow. Now you can use your regular round brush, but if you have the number 12 round blender brush, this brush makes fast work of circles and of softening in those edges. So I'm going to start with some of my warm pinky orange color here. And I'm going to start pulling my blender brush in the center. I'm going to go around and around. And I'm going to create this circle shape. I'm just going to hover around the edge. And you can see it because this brush is literally designed to have soft edges. It makes soft edges in small spaces. So you can see it already has a fuzzy edge. So that's what this brush is made for. It's great for putting rouge on cheeks and portraits and for creating mists and clouds. So I'm going to do one of these up nice and close. So again, I'm going to come into then my next largest one. And I'm just going to go around and around. I'm going to start to slow it down towards the outside edge. So it really makes fast work of these larger circle shapes. Now I've left just enough room for the little topper and hanger. It's a little bulb holder. I don't know what to call that. I'm sure there's an official name, but a bulb holder and then the hanger. So let's keep going down now with some smaller bulbs. So now it's getting a little smaller. I'm actually just putting the tip of this brush on and around and barely moving. Now we're starting to get quite small here. They can get a little bit closer together too as they're getting farther away. Now right off and into the distance. So these little guys are all about the same size. And it's with these four that I started to get a little bit bigger. So this is going to be the base color here. Then we're going to get a little bit lighter and more yellow. So we're going kind of from white to yellow to orange, and it's like hot white in the center of those bulbs. So right now they're quite dark, but when we get the lighter colors on, those are going to poppity pop, pop, pop. Now I don't know about you, but my black is still fairly wet down here. So if we want to tweak our sky at all, our sky colors, we want to do it before we pull the tall trees kind of up and over. My black is still quite wet. And we'll want that to be very dry before we get into the sky tweaking. So in the meantime, while we're waiting for our blacks to dry so we can work on them, while we're waiting for our bulbs to dry so we can work on them, we can go ahead and start pulling in some of the toppers. And the toppers are just little black, kind of like rectangles or squares, and then it's got a little handle that comes up and over the cord. So a little kind of rectangle shape, and then a little handle that comes up and over the cord. So here we go. You can use whatever brush fits best for you in that space, but for me it's going to be my tiny little number 1 round brush. So I want to have a nice tiny little detail brush here. I'm going to go into that black. And again, these are just going to be little holders, so kind of rectangle shapes. These hold in the bulbs. And then there's a handle that's going to come right up and over the cord. Let's not pull all of these handles in yet. I want to highlight the bottom of the cord, but we can come right along with the toppers. Don't pull the handles in yet. It'll be a lot easier if we highlight our cord first. Let's get on these little toppers. Bulb holders. So I want you to come around to the top of each bulb and to start, just pull the little bulb topper on. Robin says the socket. The bulb socket. Thank you, Robin. I'm going to pull on our bulb sockets. And then we want to highlight the underside of our cord. And then we want to highlight the underside of the main cord of this string to our patio lights. So you can come kind of straight underneath the bottom of the cord. And I like to use one of those nice pink colors, picking up some of the warm light from the sunset or even some of the warm glow of the lights themselves. So we want to illuminate with the warm colors that are in our surrounding environment. I'm going to use my little number 1 round brush here. Sometimes I'll mix a color right in between, so a little bit of the peach color with a little bit of the pink color. And then we've got a in between peachy pink. And we're just going to highlight the bottom of our cord. If you feel more comfortable doing this with your actual flat brush, you can. It's just best to do this now before we pull over the handles. Let's illuminate our string. Now, here's a fun trick. If you've got a really thin string and you want to thicken it up, you pull this line on the outside of the black line. If you've got, here I've got my black line quite a bit thick, so if I want to thin the line down, then I can pull the highlight on right over top of the black. So we can use our highlight color to make our line either more thin or more thick. Let's just come right across the bottom. Make sure your black is quite dry. If it's not, just wait for it to dry naturally or hit it with your blow dryer. And I'm just going to take our little brush and come right across the bottom. Just illuminate that light. Illuminate that cord. And when you're done, warm beverage time. It's much easier to pull the holders that hold the lights onto the cord over top once we've got that highlight on. We'll be using the same little brush to pull on our highlights. So go just the tip into the black, to pull on the hangers. Use your smallest brush. This is a little tiny detail, so whenever I go into the black, I want to make sure to rinse some of it off. So tap some of it off on the napkin. Just use what you need. And then these are going to come right over top of the cord and then in behind. So here we go. We want to have these coming over top of one side and in behind the other. It doesn't really matter which side you choose. I typically come up and over the cord on the front and then in behind the cord on the back, a little something like this. So over top, and here's where the cord is passing through. So over top and then in behind. Over top and then in behind. So we're going to do that again. Over top, then in behind. Over top, and then in behind. So over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. So we want to get that little detail on. We are going to illuminate the back side of the hanger once the black is dry. So once that black is dry, we'll also illuminate the back side where the light is kind of shining on the back side of the hanger. But we do want those blacks to be nice and dry before we get in there with that little tiny detail. So while we're waiting for our blacks to dry, we can get on and up and into our moon. We can get into our moon. Now, if you don't have something to trace for a circle, I do recommend grabbing something now, and you can do a small little moon way up and off into the distance. However, I think this painting might look fun, you know, with having a rather large moon on it as well. So consider that you may want to have a large moon. And the nice thing about being a painter or a crafter of any kind is you probably have all kinds of circles lying around in the form of caps and bottles for your art supply. So this is just the lid off of a Liquitex basic paint. We were just using our quinacridone magenta for our mountain challenge. So I just took the lid right off of here, screwed it off. So if you wanted a small moon, you'd have a little tiny moon up there. If you wanted a really, you know, large crescent moon, I think that would look really lovely as well. But I almost always do a tiny moon. So today I thought it would be quite fun to do a large moon. So I'm going to use a big circle. Now, whether you're using a big circle or a small circle, when we're doing a crescent moon, we want to make sure we're only using half of the circle. So we really only want the dark side of the moon is going to be occluded, and we're just going to see that little sliver of light. So what I like to do is give myself a little mark at halfway across the circle. If you're using a black lid, then just take some white paint so that we can make sure even when we're tracing an object that we're just going to use half of it. So I'm going to use this huge moon today, and I'm going to use my little tiny brush, my number 1 round brush. So rinse, rinse, rinse. I just had black on this little number 1 round brush for doing those hangers, those light hangers. If you're using the Winsor Newton white, it's again an incredibly heavy body. So whenever we're doing a round shape where we really need the paint to flow, it's quite helpful to add a little bit of water to it. That way we can really get around our curves in a timely manner. I see Patty. She says, Jessie, will you have this up for a week after the live? Patty, we're live on YouTube once a month, and we put all our technique videos on here as well. And the YouTube videos actually stay on YouTube. So I see that you came in late for the live. So this video will be up for you to enjoy whenever you want to get around to painting your own patio lights. So no need to rush. You can come back at your leisure. Okay, but let's pull on our moon. So grab a nice circle shape, or go find one. I don't know if this is going to look good with a big old moon, but I do want to try a big one. So this is the kind of thing that when I love working flat on my desk at home. I only use easels some of the time, definitely for tutorial videos. So here we go. I'm going to hold this wherever I want it in this shape here. And then I'm going to make sure the tip of my brush is pulled down to a thin fin. I love getting a little sliver of a moon. Now don't mind my head, I'm just tracing my shape, you're not missing anything. I do one side. Hold that shape down really firmly. If you could work flat, that can be quite helpful. Easier to hold a shape flat on a desk. So I just want to trace that tiny sliver and carefully remove my circle. And there I've got a big old crescent moon. Just a fun thing to fill that space. I'm so messy today. I keep getting my arms in the paint. It's just one of those days. I don't know if you have those days, but my day today has been one messy disaster after another. I got blue all over my sketchbook today. Man, my partner and I are moving provinces, so everything is scattered and we don't know where anything is. It's exciting, but holy guacamole. It's a nice thing painting is so relaxing. Dominique says, my number 1 round brush went down the kitchen sink drain when I was washing my brushes. I have done that so many times. I now make sure I put them in sideways. That's so funny. So here I've got a little sliver of a moon, and that looks cool. If you want to fatten your moon at all, do it on the inside, not the outside, because of course it's a circle shape. So if we were to go on the outside, we'd warp the circle. So if you want to thicken your crescent, then make sure to start thickening in the middle. Start thickening in the middle for me. And then just kind of taper it towards those skinny little edges. You don't have to thicken your crescent. This is just for people that want to. It's just for people that want to. So if you want to thicken that crescent, you can. When I'm working really tiny, like on paper, sometimes I paint in my moons, but sometimes I just use a Uniball gel roller, and we used one of those in our Stormy Lightning tutorial as well for some of the smaller parts of the lightning. Again, I'm moving, so I don't know. Here it is. So you can also, if you're working on a smaller piece, like maybe you're working on just a tiny little 8x10 and you're like, Jessie, even my smallest brush isn't getting the tiny little lines that I want. So you can go over top of acrylic paint with these. It is a Uniball. And here's the brand. It's this Uniball gel pen. You can use these over acrylics for tiny details like moons and stars, but just make sure it says permanent ink. So when you go into the art store, ask for a gel pen, a Uniball roller, and make sure it says, like it does there, permanent ink. And this will not come off of your canvas. So if you have a small canvas and it's just not working with the brush, you could trace a little tiny circle, and then you could use your little gel pen on here. You know, I could do a little star with this too. That kind of thing. So never be afraid to use those Uniball rollers. Now that we've got our moon on, we can start coming down into some of the other light colors, into our lights, into our fairy lights. Now I love going from a warm orange to a bit more of a lighter yellow color. So we could add some more white to this color, so it's lighter, and a little bit more yellow, so it's more yellow. So adding some white to it and adding some yellow. So here is kind of a step up. Now I like leaving some of the darker kind of peachy orange on the outside. So now when we come in with this color, we're going to use our round blender brush again. Or if you don't have a round blender, just use your regular round brush or whatever brush you love for getting circles. I recommend a round brush for round shapes. So I'm going to leave some of that orangey color on the outside edge, and I'm going to pull some of this into the middle just the same way that we did the first time. And please, please, please make sure that your black is nice and dry. We're warming it up. Because this is a nice circular tip brush, the round blender, I can actually just put the tip of it here and barely move. I can just kind of rotate the tip of these bristles and get a nice round shape. I've seen people use things like Q-tips for this, but they're kind of like a one-time thing, and then you have to throw them out. Whereas when you get a nice brush like this, you'll have it for the rest of your life if you really take care of it. So rinse. And aren't these popping out now? So all of the colors that we put on in the background we can see, but now they're really popping out from our backgrounds. Got a thumbprint in my cloud. I'll get rid of it. Okay. Speaking of those clouds, now is the time to tweak any of these little colors in your background because we're going to start pulling up the big bushy foliage in our trees. Please make sure your black is nice and dry. Now, if you wanted to say brighten a line or two, now is the time to do that. So if I came across with a really bright orange across the top of my house and through the trees, I've just kind of cut through a little bit of tree and it's no big deal. But once I get all the fancy branches up, I'm not going to want to muck with those. So think about, maybe you got a super juicy orange and you love the way it looks. But if you're like, Jess, I wanted a really, almost like a neon orange in there. I want to tweaky deaky this. Then you'd want to do it now before pulling up those trees. Diane said, what province are you moving to? We're going to move out east, Diane. We're going to move down to Nova Scotia. So right by Maine. We're going to move towards the ocean. So I might take some of this juicy orange color, juicy pink color, and just add a really bright highlight, maybe right across the top of the house. And you can just add a streak of bright color into your sunset. It doesn't have to be the whole thing. I can just brighten up a little bit or two. Now again, you don't have to do any of this brightening. You can just leave your sky. This is just to show anyone that wants to do this kind of thing. That this can be done. Dominic said he would have so much inspiration for your paintings. It's so beautiful there. Yes, we're both super excited about it. Painting water by the water is something I've dreamed of for my whole life. So this will also be the first house that I've ever bought. Have this dream of having a farm full of organic vegetables somewhere by the water, where if the world opens up again, we could have little painting retreats together and eat organic food and paint the ocean together. Okay, so you do not have to brighten the bottom of your painting, but if you wanted to do it, you would want to do it now before we get into pulling in all of those juicy black trees. So I find sometimes adding a few streaks in there can really make those colors pop from a distance. So you can give that a go. Then we're going to pull black right over top. We want to let our oranges dry. So in the meantime, let's get into some of the details up top. I do want us to highlight the back side of the light hangers using some of this kind of peachy, orangey, pink color, some of these warm background colors. So one of these warm peachy colors. Okay. And here we go. So we have with the hangers of our lights, the socket, and then the hanger comes up and over. The cord, the string, passes through. And we've got the back side of our light here. So I often just highlight the back side. And of course it's going to stop, and that just gives it a little bit of a 3D quality. Now if you want to re-highlight parts of the string, you can. Just a little highlight there. So just a little highlight there. Okay, good. So any tweaks you might want to do on your string, let's use this time to do that now. Sometimes I brighten the highlight on the string itself. We're going to add some highlights all across. And then when you're ready, and one of the parts I'm the most excited about is getting a little bit of pure white right in the center of our lights. Then if we want, we can add a little bit more of a radiant glow. Then we're going to get down into the black. We're down to the last 3 mini steps of this painting. We've done all of the hard work, filling in our sky, working on our cloud game, pulling in the big solid objects. So from here on out, it's just a lot of tweaky deakies and little details. So I'm going to rinse off my round blender brush, which is the one I like using for the fairy lights, for the patio lights. And I'm going to go into a little bit of white. I always like to make sure my white has a bit of water in it. And essentially we're just going to pull the white in the middle, and then we're going to fuzz it out. We do want to see some of that yellow glow, so just right in the middle and feather it out, allowing the other colors to shine through. Now if you don't have a round blender, please use any round, just your regular like number 6 round brush is going to work quite well for this. So really brightening here. Now, if you've never used the round blender before, one of the major tricks with this brush, of course, is pushing really gently. It's pushing really gently. So now our lights are really glowing. It's a good time to kind of step back from the painting. And here I've got my chalk outlines here, so I can just kind of gently rub those off. A slightly damp napkin. Okay. Once we've got the light in the center of our fairy lights, and we may want to go around the outside with a little bit more of an orange glow to make it really, really illuminate. It's time to get down in the silhouette of our trees. We'll want to use a nice square shaped brush. So your number 6 bright brush and your little number 6 flat brush. So your 1/2 inch and your 1/4 inch flat brushes make excellent stipplers for foliage. And let's take a peek at some of the edges of these trees. So having realistic tree silhouettes is something that can bring a lot of beauty to many, like a simple sky gradient and then some really beautiful trees is a great addition to any painting. So let's carefully take a look at the edges of some of these. So in this little tree here, it's like a coniferous tree, so a straight line up the center. And then the brush strokes are kind of coming out at an angle, pointing upwards, and they close up to the top a little bit. So here those brush strokes are coming out on an angle, and I just tap in with the tip. Whereas a tree like this, little tiny taps and stipples and really vary the direction of your brush. And for the big tree, we've got kind of half a tree here, and then we've got little stipples coming out, and then a few, branches full of foliage coming out on those sides. So let's really work on keeping our stipples loose and organic for this part of our painting. I'm going to start with my number 6 bright brush. I'm going to snuggle and I'm going to wipe into the black. And here we go. It's the side where we maybe want some trees to be. I love having a little one come, right up and in behind the house. So you can use the corner of this brush, tapping up and over. We've got this little tree there, letting our beautiful bright colors kind of shine through. Maybe there's another one over here. Little ones in the background. Be bold with your blacks. Don't be afraid to just get in there and tap. Just like clouds, want to make sure the tips of our tree shapes have some visual interest. So we really want to make sure there's, something really random coming out or up. And those branches can kind of come up and out, in all directions. They kind of fan out. Then maybe we get like an even bigger tree over here. Just letting some of that background shine through. And this is going to add a lot of texture to our paintings, a lot of life and dimension. You could make sure to tap your brush in different directions. One of those coniferous trees would be a bit more, here's a stem. This could be like one of those cedar trees, and I kind of tap up on an angle and close it up towards the top. We've all seen these beautiful conical like cedar bushes. I just love these. Okay. And then maybe we've got a big tree on the side. I'm going to tap out a little branch. So here's the top. Tap, tap, tap for me. Okay. Here's a branch. So I'm picturing there's a huge tree off to the side here. Can't go wrong with this kind of thing. Just have fun and loosen up. I always like to step back and see if there's any last minute. Do I need another tree coming up from here? I can't decide. I think I do. think I need one more here. Okay. We're going to stipple away. We're going to stipple away. Now maybe you splattered your stars and maybe you wanted to hand paint your stars. So either way, even if I splatter stars, it's always nice to have some that are a little bit bigger than others. And to get some nice big focal point stars, we're going to use our tiny little #1 round brush and go just a tip into some white. If you've got that Winsor Newton white or any heavy body white, maybe even the Golden Open is quite heavy body, so is the regular heavy body Liquitex. So I always pull my brush down and add a tiny bit of water to help my paint flow. And then anywhere that there's some visual dead space, anywhere that you really think you want to add an interesting element to your painting, you can add some bigger stars. I'm going to add another little juicy bit of white to my moon so it's really vibrant. And I think one of my favorite things about this painting is all the different sources of light. We have light, warm light from the sun, and then of course the sun reflecting off of the moon, the reflected light off of the moon, and then we've got the golden glow of the artificial light. And I forget what happened. We had a power outage. I was thinking the other day about how different life would be without light, without our artificial lights. And we're so dependent on our lights, and they really are a beautiful thing. But I think it's fun to think about what life would be like without a lot of our modern comforts. We'd be up with the sun. I'm certainly not up with the sun. I finally started getting up really early, but that took years of training. I'm not a natural morning person like some people are. My hubby is, and I'm so envious. He can have a whole day sometimes before my body even feels awake. And morning is such a peaceful, calm time. It's like you've got the whole day ahead of you. Okay, so we can add some larger stars, and then of course that's another source of light, of course, is the starlight. Like little suns way out there in the galaxy. So we'll add our starlight. There's just two more things I want us to do in our paintings today. I know for some of you it's probably getting on towards dinner time. I want us to go through and add a bit of an orange glow, or any kind of, we can beef up the illumination factor in our fairy lights. But I also want to show you how to subtly indicate that this is a house. So because it's nighttime, there's no direct light on the house and the trees. We just see a little bit of, reflected light on the peak of the house, on the A-frame. And we're going to do that using some of our sky color, but that darker purple color. We could even use the color that we have in our cloud. So this cloud color, our sort of dusty lavender. Our dusty lavender would be a great one for that. So let's pull out our small little #6 flat brush, our 1/4 inch flat brush, because it's already the shape we need it to be. Let's go into our dusty lavender color and let's pull in the frame of our house. So these nice square shape brushes, depending on your canvas size, this could do the work for us. We could just use the width of the brush itself. And let's come right along that A-frame, down one side and the other. Down one side and then the other. We could also take a little bit of this purple color right across the top of our roof. Not as bright, so just a little bit more muted, just blend it out a little. Okay. So just gently picking up on our house. And then last but not least, I want to show you a fun way to get a little bit more of a glow effect. If you've got the little number 6 round blender, which I know some of you do, you could use this brush. If you don't have a number 6 round blender, you could use any old round brush, like your regular number 6 round brush. But let's use a little bit of a watery paint in our original, the first color we used, which is this kind of peachy pink color. And let's get a little bit of this warm color, nice and juicy, so nice and wet. Adding water to our paint not only helps it flow, but it makes it a little bit more see-through. So I'm using a little number 6 round blender, and I'm going to swoop around the outside of my paints with a really runny color, and that's going to make it really see-through. So I'm going to come right around here. I'm going to wipe most of the color off, so this should just be a nice see-through layer. I'm just going to come right around, even up over the socket a little bit. You know, this is radiant light. And as this dries, you know, I'm going to use my water to fuzz this in. And as this dries, it's going to give it such a wonderful kind of glow. It's going to make it glow. So have lots of water in there, tap most of the color off, and let's just go around the outside of our, I needed to add a bit more water to mine. I'm going to swirl it in towards the center, even use my finger to kind of buff it out a little. So just using a bit of this kind of golden color, a little bit on the see-through side. Adding a little bit of a warm golden orange glow around the outside of our lights is the last official step to patio lights at night. Since we're here live, if you have any last minute questions for me, I'm here for you. Otherwise, I'm going to hang out for just a few minutes. I want to show you what we have coming up. We have our very first Painters Challenge coming up. And what that means is it's a free challenge of 4 tutorials that dives really quite deeply into a single subject. So coming up on April 24th, on my website at jessierobertson.com, we're going to do a mountain challenge that's really going to focus on palette knife painting specifically for mountains. And we're going to start with the basics. So we're going to begin by painting a really basic peak and analyzing the structure of these epic peaks using palette knives. And once you're finished the first painting, you'll head right on over to my website, upload the picture, and then that unlocks the next step of the challenge, where we're going to get slowly more and more detailed with our mountains. So we're going to get into painting some of these kind of cool blues, reflections, and distance. We're going to get into using lighting and color, and of course using the palette knife in some smaller spaces and really working on those peak breaks in our mountains. So each time you finish a painting, you're going to upload it to the website, and that will unlock the next part of your challenge. And then for the last one, this is just a mini challenge of 4 paintings. It's kind of like a fitness challenge, but for painting. And you'll get to see all of your paintings on the website side by side, so it's a great way to track your progress. And if you want to dive deeply into mountain painting, and specifically doing some really basic but effective palette knife breaks for mountains, this is the challenge for you. We'll be doing a little bit of fun stuff with clouds and flowers as well. So the mountain challenge is coming up in April, as well as Earth Day. So if you head on over to jessierobertson.com, we will be painting our Earth together for Earth Day. I have a collection of globes. I have over 100 globes that live in our tiny basement. So I'm quite fond of the Earth and the globe, and we'll have some live models. And again, I do 2 free tutorials every weekend, so you can find them all over on my website at jessierobertson.com. And we use YouTube for mostly our technique videos, and because it's a wonderful live community. So I will be pulling out one of my oldest and favorite, this one's a little warped, spring tutorials for our next YouTube live, which is coming up this month. We will be painting, this is called English Garden. This is very Monet-like. We're going to do a lot of stippling. There's no straight lines, so if you're straight line challenge, this is a great one for you. This is very beginner friendly as well, and if stippling is something that you struggle with, and it is a technique that so many people find challenging, because if anyone's technical minded, loosening up and letting the brush do the work for you can take a little bit of practice. So we are going to stipple our brains out for our English garden paintings, and this should get you quite comfortable with the technique by the end of it. Plus it's all those vibrant colors and a perfect painting for leading into the summer season. Well, that's all I'm going to show you for now. I'll stop rambling on. I don't see any more questions popping up. So thank you so much for joining me for these patio lights paintings. I really hope you enjoyed painting these patio lights with me today. As always, I hope you picked up a few new acrylic tips and tricks. And if you choose to share your finished project on social media, be sure to tag me so that I can find you. And you can just tag me at Keep It Colorful, all one word. You can always find more from me over on my website at jessierobertson.com. And if you love our content, feel free to subscribe to our channel. I do have 1 to 2 live videos here every month and lots of technique videos. Well, that's it for me, everyone. I hope you have a fantastic day for the rest of it. Take care. Bye.